Hello, everyone. I think now we're live. Good evening. I'm joining you together with Onur.
Hello.
And Guillaume.
Hello.
From Berlin. Well, I'm representing the Tbilisi Architectural Biennial, and I'm really happy to welcome you tonight for this evening for this webinar, and thank Onur for organizing all this. And I will come back when there is a discussion. And please, Onur, you can go ahead with the introduction.
Okay.
So enjoy the talk, everyone.
Thank you. Sorry. Hi, I am with Gio here.
Hello again.
Thank you for joining us here. We are, as Tico said, we are at my apartment in Berlin, and here is kind of a semi-lockdown. It's not allowed to make cultural events, so we are at home. So here we are with all the panelists, and we have Lydia Matthews, Anna Ramazashvili, Lela Rekashvili, Georgi Rodino, Marike cannot be joining us today, Katarina Stadler, and Sofia Tabatadze. So briefly, I will explain how the panel will work. At first we will introduce ourselves, 5 minutes, and our involvement with Bazaar and markets in Tbilisi. And then this first part will be like 1 hour or less. And then we will make a very short pause. Well, it depends on the time, if it is after 1 hour. And then we continue our roundtable discussion. So my 5 minutes starts now. I'm Onur. I'm an architect and researcher and artist. At the moment, I'm writing my PhD thesis in Brandenburg Technical University in Cottbus, close to Berlin. And it is based on urban transformation in Istanbul. More specifically, it's about the people who salvage building parts from before demolitions, and they sell it secondhand. There's a market for secondhand doors and frames. And with the first edition of the Biennial, I somehow I found that this secondhand stuff is being sold in Tbilisi, in a scrapyard in Tbilisi. Basically, with Tina, we found a Facebook page, and it was posted second-hand building components from Istanbul. So it's not related with the topic of the bazaar, but how I, kind of involved in Tbilisi and how I went there. During my first visit, Gio took me. It was an election day again, actually. Do you remember?
Yeah.
And then we make this Samgori market walk, and which he did 2 weeks ago again. And so this walk inspired us to make a research project, or start up a research project for the Biennial. Because Samgori had many layers in it, like you can do anything. You will explain it more in detail.
Yeah.
So in relation to this, like at the past, who already worked there and produced work there, and it would be a nice pivotal point to start the conversation. So I will switch to the theme now to talk about the potential of markets and bazaars as commons in relation to the topic of the Biennial. I think the most important potential of bazaar is the possibility of sharing knowledge, like voices, sounds, smell, food recipe, homemade remedies, repair tutorials are shared through the spaces. It is a commercial and private space, but they can also occupy streets and squares. So it's kind of, it has, in Tbilisi especially, it has this flexible identity. And also street vending is very common in Tbilisi. So this bazaar is kind of like supported with street vendors. And also the activities and social interactions are significant in bazaars. So this social interactions start with bargains, negotiations, and this creates kind of a mutual sympathy between the seller, the trader, and the buyer, the customer. And this economic understanding and willing to negotiate, it comes to a point that the prices might be reduced, or there's this kind of mutual relationship. This interaction and participation are unlimited because there's a direct contact of the producer coming from the villages. This kind of relationship is very hard in a privatized commercial space, in a shopping mall, for example, where most of the things are produced in China, or through internet or internet buying, internet commerce. So as a space, Bazaar is being performed by customers, sellers, street vendors. I want to regard to Stavrides, who made the opening speech of the Biennial. He said, like, space becomes potential when it's performed. So this performance of the people, the community around the bazaars is being added right now with architects, artists, or researchers. So it's already like kind of a growing potential. So the question is, what will be shared and how? And I mean the content-wise, process, duration, methods of the project. And so in bazaars, all Tbilisi comes together, locals and migrants. These markets are where the stories of people come together. I think storytelling comes to play as a method. I want to highlight Marike's work. She couldn't join us today. She made a sound walk in 2014 in Deserter Bazaar. It is based on stories of people who migrate to Tbilisi and became part of the place. So it's online, and you can listen to it. It's basically, if you go to the web page of this talk in the Biennial page, you can find this list of works, also the panelists' works. So I want to end it with repeating our questions and pass it to Gio. We produced these questions collectively during our first meeting in September. So the first question is, what is at stake in bazaars regarding privatization and gentrification as a witness to Tbilisi's shifting urban dynamics and recently with the pandemic? And how vendors fight back to the restriction and bans, because like there's this kind of informality within especially street vending or like the flea market. What are the researcher and the artist's role in making socially engaged and community-based projects in such commercial spaces? What are the commoning tools to present the political and social issues related to bazaars? What other support work research formats can we think of? So these are our questions, and thank you for all participating, especially panelists. And here I give the place to you.
Yeah, here I come. I don't know, I will do a little bit of introduction of who I am and what I'm doing. My name is Georgi Rodionov. I was born in Tbilisi, not far from Zamgori market, actually. So it was always my neighborhood where, as a kid, I would just run whatever I needed to get. I would just get it there. And then I became an artist. And as my artistic practice, I'm very much interested in social structure and how the little groups or the whole country functions with social issues or political issues. And that was one of the main reasons why we also established the Untitled Gallery 1.5 years ago in Tbilisi. And we are also working on social issues, not only in Georgia, but also in the region, Azerbaijan and Armenia. I was always interested in the markets, especially in the open markets of Tbilisi, because I think it's one of the most important places in the town, where like not, I mean, it's getting less and less, but before it was one of the main spots where people would meet, not only for buying stuff or selling their production, but also for exchanging information, basically. And so it was always very, very much interested. And then Onur came last year. It was a very beautiful sunny day. And yeah, we went there and we actually found out that it's this magical place that I was experiencing might come to the end, you know. So that was very touchy for me to find out. I mean, I know that this huge aggressive capitalism is like approaching Georgia as well, and like they're just like eating all these like small spots around the town. But there was a moment when I realized that it actually happens, and it might come pretty soon there as well. Because like this Samgori market, I don't know if you've been there, but it's a place basically thing, you know. When you enter this market, you feel like a magician because you can do whatever you want, and you can get whatever you want for your actions. And I found out that I was losing this magical tool in the town, which is not only like me playing around in this part of the city, but also people. They survive with this. They survive with this structure of communication and the market values. So what we found out that it's like probably soon they already built the new blocks in different areas. For example, I don't know if you followed us 2 weeks ago when we did the live tour again in the frame of Tbilisi Architectural Biennial. We went to the Jewish cemetery, which is also around the market, and the women there told us that like some part of the cemetery is already gone because now there's basically it's ridiculous. Now there's this new block, which in my opinion it just looks ugly, but also it took the space which was supposed to mean that there is a market. You know, there's the exchange place that still gives the individuals to go and do their business without any bigger corporations or government involvement. So they can reorganize the space by themselves. And then we see more and more blocks like this happening around this space. And I think we need to think about general architecture, how it develops in Tbilisi, and like, do we really need to build stuff in the place where people basically like get money for their life? And yeah, that was my main question. The politics of the architecture and what stands behind. Yeah, I don't know if I'm short of time.
No.
Yeah.
And also, I want to highlight this factory building there.
Yeah.
Which is occupied at the moment.
Yeah. So it was also interesting to research basically what was happening in Soviet times, what was happening before that, and what's happening now with this like new independence Georgia, but also the COVID situation. So basically, like in Soviet times, they made this more structured, where it was more or less controlled who was selling what and where. But after the independence, basically, not only in the area of the market, but also in different parts of the city, just randomly in the streets as well, people started to occupy the abandoned buildings and spots. And one of them is this huge factory in the middle of the place in Samgori, which is also occupied by the people who are selling cheese, meat, and wine. And actually, you can get really cheap wine there. Like I think it's 2 lari per liter, and 2 lari is like what, what? 50 cents already from today's rates. It became 4. So 50 cents you can get 1 liter of good wine.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And it's happening also in this abandoned factory. And but the pandemic, the COVID-19 situation, changed also the structure, or not basically the structure, but how people moving there. So yeah. And thank you very much. And I hope you didn't get bored. And if you have any questions later, you can always ask.
Yeah.
And now let's go to Lela. Hello, Lela.
Hello. I'm very glad to be with all of you again. And thanks for giving me the word. I can only build and continue on what Georgi was saying, but let me first introduce myself. I'm Lela Rekhviashvili. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at Leibniz Institute of Regional Geography. This is a small or mid-sized, very nice research institute in Leipzig, focusing on Germany and Eastern Europe, and very often also on Caucasus and Central Asia. And for past about 5 years, I've been doing more work on mobilities, urban mobilities, but for past 10 years or so, I've been looking into informal economic practices. And bazaars, for me, the topic of bazaars opened up for me with my PhD work at Central European University in Budapest. Back then, when I started this work in 2010, this was not a research question. It was a anger of a Georgian citizen on why did this state become so desperately and hopelessly neoliberal. And there was not so much to answer that. So what I started with was how did people cope with these neoliberal transformations? And that's how I came to street vendors, which in those years, starting from 2006, but most severely starting from 2010-11 to 2013, were very, very violently and fiercely repressed. And street vendors, you might know, street vendors in Tbilisi are all around the city, but they have, as a tendency, concentrated in and around bazaar places or marketplaces. And they became one of the primary targets of cleansing the public spaces in the city. So my questions were much less architectural. They were much more about what did it mean that the state started going against petty traders and street vendors? Why was it necessary for building capitalism? And I think this is usually, not, we might say it's clear, but sometimes it's not all that clear, right? The state that was claiming to be market oriented was going around and repressing small market players, one could say. But then I started working with why was this very crucial for building a neoliberal state. And I also looked into how the street vendors mobilized for years and years through more conventional mobilization strategies like protests and establishing Street Vendors League. These are histories that are left in rare works because, of course, media would never pick on these stories, but vendors really protested a lot, and they really had also managed to do a bit of associational life. And once the repression became very hard, their resistances became much more invisible, right? So this diversity of tactics of resisting repression was also what I was very much interested in. Currently, I don't work so much, even though I follow as much as I can, or whatever Georgian media provides me with, or whenever I am here and I can go to bazaars. I try to observe and follow the story. A lot has changed since. I think we see less of overt repression and police running after old ladies with their baskets full of zvanili, like herbs or peaches, but we see much more capitalist urbanism being in motion in a sense of already very much constructing and building and offering new alternatives. And if I still have time, I would say one more very personal thing, that I do see bazaars and its surroundings and street vendors and the spaces that such petty trade shapes as very controversial spaces. I do romanticize them, obviously, and I do see them as core and very important part of urban social, cultural, and economic life. But I also do have this kind of feeling that it's also a very traumatizing space for many people, because many people ended up being in these places out of not having choices. Many people ended up there being often even ashamed of their work, and the repressions didn't help them. So a lot of times the vendors, and this is a very gendered business, right? It's a very gendered occupation, predominantly women. They would have to find narratives, and this is also part of resistance. It's not just protest, but they would have to find narratives on how their work is honest, how they're not cheating, how they're not lying, how they understand that it would be nicer to have a cleaner street, but it's beyond their capacity. And I think at least I just wanted to bring up this aspect or the side that it's very beautiful, very painful space.
Thank you. I think these are really valuable comments. And now I give the place to Sofia. Sofo? Unmute yourself. Yeah.
Always happens. Hi, so Paul and Sofia is me. So my name is Sofia Tabatadze, and I'm a visual artist and I'm curator. I also organize things, and I live between Tbilisi and Berlin. And my involvement in Bazaars was a place called Biennial. Biennial used to be a building in quite central Tbilisi. So whoever knows Tbilisi a little bit, it's where the flower market is, next to the river. If you go down from the Liberty Square to the river. So that was a building called Biennial. It was a building which was kind of a Soviet invention, let's say. So there have been always street vendors, and there have been always repair people, like making like individual goods, like, you know, producing shoes or repairing shoes or producing like kind of individual things for people. So not as opposed to factory within the Soviet setting, let's say. They have been always in Tbilisi, these vendors. And then the Soviets kind of decided to put them together. So they built a house called Biennial, 6-floor house, where all kinds of individual making and repair took place. So then, like, throughout the kind of different decades, the building functioned differently. So in the beginning, it was, of course, very beautiful building, and, you know, it was new and it was kind of luxurious within the Soviet luxury kind of understanding. And there used to be some fashion shows and some individual clothing, and they were producing magazine to, you know, tell about the stories of Biennial and what Biennial was producing. Then in 80s, all the people who worked there, they tell some crazy stories how wealthy they were, because there was all of a sudden kind of Soviet Union was shaking up a little bit and people were starting making a lot of money. And these people were kind of almost like magicians, because they could produce things in kind of place where everything was on deficit. So it's, let's say, for example, like a leather belt for your neck with like metal, whatever they're called, you know, like cool looking stuff. These people could make, they could produce, and then you wouldn't be able to buy this anywhere else. or like a wedding dress. They could make you a wedding dress with shiny things, which was not possible to do anywhere else. So it was a very famous place. People would come from the villages to use it, and Tbilisians, of course, they all used these services. So it's an interesting place because like everyone knows about it. So if you say Pirimze, everyone has probably like 10 stories to tell, and not all of them are, of course, very nice, because these were like vendors who kind of knew how to deal the money and therefore also cheat. And of course, some say that they are very honest, but some say that they can also cheat. So actually, it was a marketplace, and these were the almost few people who kind of handled money and had money in their hands. And therefore, it was kind of almost like a small capitalistic world within the Soviet Union. And then the 90s came, and then in 90s, Georgia became independent in 91, and then it was like super hard times because there was electricity was almost never there, and people were very empowered. People were standing in the bread queues whole night and stuff like this. So no one, and the economy was really down, and we didn't really know how to continue within this new system. And then Pirimze became again very important because everyone was so impoverished that everyone needed to repair. So if you had jeans that was kind of almost dying, you would kind of bring it back and back and back to repair it and to kind of keep it alive. So it was almost like a reanimation of objects that kind of you couldn't just let go. So for example, in my film, there is there is one part where this one guy repairs this super cheap umbrella, and for everyone from Western look, it's like, wow, repairing this Chinese umbrella, it's almost impossible. But yeah. So then, of course, there were more of this, not this craftsmen, but there are so many taxi drivers now in town because you have to survive somehow. There are so many street vendors because you have to do something. You have to somehow survive. So this, many people, just became also these repair guys who actually have not done anything before, but now they kind of started repairing. So there was another hierarchy of who is real and who is fake. So this was kind of Pirimze, and I decided to make a project about it, which turned into a book, installation, and a film. And I will tell you more about it when my next turn comes.
Thank you. And we showed this documentary in Berlin last week, and it was quite good. And now I'm giving the space to Lydia.
Thank you. Thank you all. It's really a pleasure to be here. My name is Lydia Matthews, and I'm a independent curator. Also, I teach at Parsons School of Design in New York, but I'm somebody who lives between New York City and Athens, Greece, which is where I am right now. And I, in terms of my interest in and how I really became involved in doing projects in Georgia, it came out of my curatorial work. And at the time, I was already very interested in thinking about curating beyond the white cube, thinking about the way in which you can use curatorial projects to get a lot of socially engaged activity going. So when I first came to Georgia, it was just on the heels of the Rose Revolution. So the first project I did there was in 2006. And even though I was interested in socially engaged work at that time, I'd never been to Georgia. I really didn't know a lot about the culture, and I felt like I needed to have a better understanding of a place before I would even begin to imagine a socially engaged project. So when I arrived there, interestingly, the space, so I brought a bunch of work with me for this international art exhibition that I had been invited to curate. but we arrived, the space that we had been promised suddenly hadn't worked out, and we were taken to this, what was then a brand new glass and chrome building, shopping center, exactly what was displacing the markets, and it was literally built on the footprint of one of the big farmers markets in Tbilisi. And so that was sort of my first kind of awareness of this, what would then become a very radical transformation of the landscape, the culture, the economy of Georgia. And since then, I've been lucky enough to be invited back to do 10 projects. So I've witnessed the changes over the years, and it's really interesting to see that transition between, that kind of that post-Soviet moment when neoliberal capitalism is ushered in spades. But when I got there on the first time, I met a lot of really amazing artists and artist collectives. Sophia's was one of them at the time. And I was so inspired by the kind of interest in dialogue and the kind of quality of the work there that I was thrilled to be able to kind of keep coming back and keep allowing the projects to organically develop. And so, needless to say, no matter what project it was, after that, I always brought artists with me because I felt that the dialogue had to be between local artists and communities and the people that I was working. We wound up at Eliava Market, no matter what. We needed materials, we needed screws, we needed whatever we needed, we would go there. And so even from the time of my first visit, I was introduced to the market and quite enchanted by it, actually. And also very aware of it as Leila was saying, this kind of contested space. But what happened by the time, every time I would go back and do projects, we would increasingly become involved at Eliava Market. But in 2012, I was doing a residency at GeoArt, again, pointing to Sophia here, because that was such an incredible artist in residence opportunity. And I met Kat then as well, because every time I do a project, I was interested in working with students around the city as well. So I came back there to do a workshop on socially engaged curatorial practice that had been sponsored by the Open Society Foundation. And out of the proposals from that workshop, Chuka Kaprava came to me and said, I'm excited about this, and there's space I'm really interested in using as an off-site kind of venue for projects, and that is this market right next to me. It's called Eliava. I think you know it. And so that was kind of the beginning of thinking about how to do the Eliava Market project. And I was really interested in, again, bringing artists to work with local, kind of doing matchmaking between US artists and local artists to think about what the market could mean. And partly this came out of my conversation with Chuka, because, it was very clear that she said that it was, almost a kind of space that people were slightly embarrassed by as the culture was changing. There was a lot of, tension around the space. And it also seemed very clear that not only was it kind of a necessary evil, as she characterized it for a lot of people, not everybody saw it that way, but the younger generation of students hadn't yet really seen it from the point of view of it as a resource, beyond just having to get a material now and then. But I was very interested in developing this Eliava Market project so that students could be involved, local artists, international artists, and everybody could kind of begin to engage in the market as a space of knowledge production, as Onar said initially, and thinking about the way in which the social commerce of this space was equally important as the kind of economic trade. So that is really how that project began, was as a kind of challenge to think about how to reframe the space so that it could be seen with fresh eyes, and so that we could begin to imagine a series possibly of artist in residence kinds of experiences at the market, and work with the local vendors who to collaborate with them to make things happen. So I'll tell you more about the project as we go on, but that at least gives you a sense of how I got there and why I completely fell in love with Georgia, and why I keep going back all the time, because it's just such an interesting space in transition.
Thank you, Lydia. Now Anna will jump in.
Hello, everyone. My name is Anna Ramadashvili. I'm a PhD student at Tbilisi State University. My PhD is about Lilo Market, which is located in Tbilisi. And I will briefly talk about the history of this market, how it appeared, and how does it goes for nowadays. It was founded and privatized in 1991. But before that, before 90s, actually it was a marketplace where mostly Azerbaijani people, like minorities, Azerbaijani minorities, were coming and selling their goods there, but there was no shelves, there was no infrastructure there. They were coming and bringing everything in the ground. After 1991, everything started changing there, and it became more structured, and there was a lot of people coming, because it was like a center, trade center of Georgia, and also to the whole Caucasus, because it was the main place where all the communities in Georgia or even around Georgia were coming and changing goods, different kind of goods. Actually, this bazaar is quite big. It's around 22 hectares, and for nowadays there are different ethnic groups who are selling their stuff there, and even it is divided. Everyone knows, for example, if you need to buy some techniques, there are all mostly Kurdish people who are selling these techniques. And if you want textile, it's more about Azerbaijani people, and etc. So actually, my main focus was about the traders who have some connections with Indian traders. And my PhD is based on that kind of economic relationships connecting Georgian and Indian traders together. During this pandemic period, it actually Lilo Market was closed in 19th of March, and actually it has its own administration, which write down on their webpage that because of this pandemic period, the bazaar is closed, and they don't know when they will be reopened again. But in 1st of June, they had this official announcement that they are open and everyone could join and visit the place again. But still, as the market is open, there are a lot of things you should do before entering in this bazaar, like taking gloves and the masks, and actually it's you need to sterilize your hands every time. And still there are these regulations, but it's quite hard to keep the traders and also the customers to keep distance and to be careful and don't touch really anything, because it should be it could be that dangerous for your health. But actually, after opening the Lila market, there was, I think, much more people going there because in my cases, what I heard, there was everyone waiting for opening the market. Because, like, I don't know, maybe because of this 3 months they were sitting at homes and they really needed to go out, but not only this case, but actually all the businesses were stopped and everyone wanted to somehow start and open their small businesses. Not only the traders in that market, but also others who are taking the goods to other cities in Georgia, like Zugdidi, Kutaisi, or Batumi, or even Rustavi or Gori. So, like, everyone were very waiting to open it, and I think that for our main this panel, what we do have in common is that maybe yes, there are a lot of regulations, but still people are trying to do their best not to stop the economy and somehow improve their conditions what they have for now because of the COVID-19. If you have some questions, I can happily answer them.
Wow, Anna, it's
Thank you.
exactly 5 minutes. Thank you.
You're very precise.
And now, lastly, we turn to Katarina.
Yay, I'm unmuted. Hello, everyone. My name is Katarina Stadler. I'm a conceptual artist living here in Tbilisi, I think for a bit more than 10 years now. Well, apart from that, at the moment, just to also introduce myself quickly, I'm working on a PhD at the Art University. I actually don't know how it's called in English, but something like Art University in Linz in Austria, on a topic that has been haunting me for at least 10 years, how sound and ideology are connected, which basically already explains the two things I'm most interested in. One is sound, our perception of sound, the experimentation with sound, obviously. And the other thing, ideology in the context of ideological structures, how society and societies are based on ideological structures. I mainly use the concept of Althusian structures that are reproduced by all of us, not those that are imposed by a state or some kind of authority. At the same time, I'm really grateful about that. Right now, I'm a research associate at the Centre of Contemporary Art in Londonderry. And I hope that at some point, when we will all be more free in movement, I can finally go to Northern Ireland and also test out my, ideas and speculations there. But coming to the main topic of what we're discussing today, and I'm really happy to take part in it, even though I'm also, to be very honest, not a specialist in markets. My first and strongest connection to markets is very close to what Lydia said. Eliava, as an artist living in the city, you cannot, well, maybe you can, I don't know, but basically you go to Eliava on a regular basis. And it's the most beautiful and the most frustrating experience always. Most beautiful because there is everything. I mean, you're so inspired about, oh, I could use this material and look at this material. And, you know, what Anna just said, like, I shouldn't go to Eliava too much these days because I will touch anything and everything. Most frustrating because whatever you look for, that's the one thing you cannot find. Anyway, so in, let me think, 2014, I was invited to work together with an Albanian artist in residence, Doni Kacina. By the way, if you're listening, hi. And we worked together on Eliava. And there was this incentive, which on one hand makes total sense, but which basically introduces the problematic of artists, architects, whoever working with markets. So the whole point of the project to some extent was to obviously work together with people and figure out ways, communicate about the issue of recycling on the market. Actually, it's not only an issue of recycling, it's just basically an issue of any kind of trash. But then you kind of have to imagine a situation. We were two women working in the car part market. Generally, Eliava is male-based. I think probably the percentage is around 98%. There are very, very few women. Most of the women who work there are in the food business, but not sellers. I mean, you find them once in a while, but rarely. So we were two women artists having one of those budkas, and then we were supposed to teach people how to recycle in a place where we didn't even know where to put our trash, because there were no trash bins inside of our district, our area in the market. And both of us, there was what Lydia also said, bringing people together. Sometimes it can work really, really nicely, because we didn't know each other before, but we very quickly, I think it took us a few days, both of us were like, we cannot teach anybody here. It would be very presumptuous, very arrogant, very also putting again this class difference, because everybody who knows Eliava a bit knows that if you want to generalize, most people in Tbilisi don't think very highly of people working on the market. And again, coming in and being like, you guys need to recycle. Why do you pour the oil on the ground? Why do you burn the trash in the evening? We didn't want to do that. So after some time, like getting to know the people around us, we kind of decided to flip it around, to rather look for the knowledge there, whatever kind of knowledge. We were talking about recycling. Then when you look at all those different budkas, you realize that most of the boxes and shelves and small chairs and whatever is used is recycled. Nothing of that was bought to equip the selling space. All of that was recycled. So I'm interested in this aspect of knowledge, obviously, but most importantly in this discussion here, what I would like to discuss for future project, for all of us actually, is how can we do projects like that without imposing? What are the key parameters? Do they exist? But how to not continue class division that obvious.
Thank you very much. It's a very, very
interesting approach. Yeah.
Valid question. So since we introduce all each other, shall we give a break? It's already 45 minutes, but I don't. Do we need a break to continue, or I think we can.
Great. So maybe you decide instead of us discussing if we should.
Okay. So we discuss 20 minutes more, and then we give a break. So from Katarina, so we can return back to the question that what you would like to discuss. How can we project without imposing something recycling, or that you referred as like this class reference, and how it might what we can engage in when we think about projects about these places. So we can start with this question and then unfold to other ones. Maybe it's related with this socially engaged art practices. Maybe Lydia, you have a more insight about this, and also as well as Sofo can comment more from the practice, and also the others also. Yeah. Katarina?
I will just quickly start, since I was on the floor of talking already.
Yeah, go ahead.
Don't worry, I'm not going to talk for another 10 minutes. But as also in our meeting in September, I think I mentioned it, is this idea of long-term projects.
Yeah.
Which I know like most of us are working based on funding, and then it's like 6 weeks or 2 months or something. But I think we need to figure out how to create long-term projects that involve all kinds of people, and that on that level also can develop in all kinds of ways. I know though that for most artists and most architects or etc. researchers, since we are connected to funding, this is the most difficult part. To really stick to a project, let's say for 3-4 years, and for instance, not travel in between, or when you travel, still stay connected, which brings the other main question, how many of us who are traveling a lot because of our work can stay connected to one locale, to one, like, you know, your district, your surroundings. And then I shut up. Thank you.
I think this question also challenged with the existing situation that nobody can travel.
Mm.
I don't want to say it did good, but this mobility issue is also that is something that should be questioned, because within this structure of culture, also research, also architecture, it is really impossible to think about one local place, but impose in that way. This globalization also triggered, and with this flow of like this funding and the structures, and this within this funding structures is also like there should be some mechanism that you can be able to give insights afterwards. But once the money is like transferred, apart from the reports, I don't think that these feedbacks really work to reflect upon like following up projects. Well, that's my point of view, like personal view.
I can tell from my experience that like she was looking for some projects, and they saw the Katarina's project as well, and maybe her project is now finished, but she's still living in that neighborhood at near Eliava market, and she's always trying to somehow recycle or keep that public spaces more clean and somehow healthy. And I think, yeah, maybe some projects are finishing quite fast, but still they have some influence on other people, for example, for neighborhood, or maybe some strange guy who was just walked and saw the project and liked it and tried his best to improve the environment. But still, yeah, it's really pity when the projects finish quite fast.
You know, I think these are really excellent questions, and I guess one of the things that when I reflect on them is that, you know, there's different ways of understanding a durational commitment to a place, or a way of working in relationship to you know, a community as well as a specific site of the marketplace. Because, like, I know that for me, I wouldn't really think about doing a project in Tbilisi as somebody who's not living in Tbilisi or from Tbilisi without doing it in collaboration with a co-curator who you know, all the decisions are made kind of collectively. And so for me, that is one of the ways in which I might not be there after a specific project that's granted ends, but, you know, that person is still there. And you know, depending on how it goes, there's also the possibility that things can continue. So for me, it's very much also about the social networks that are established in the co-creation of events, the kinds of efforts that are made then to continue to imagine, like, discuss what did we learn, what is now still needed, what might be the next project. You know, there is also a kind of way in which things can evolve out of the actual relationships. I know that a number of the artists who I worked with And like they didn't, both between Shuka and I going around the market and really proposing to a variety of vendors what some of the some of the ideas were, we really only worked with vendors who were really kind of excited about doing something different, about the opportunity to experience working with an artist in a way to make something happen. And just to give you a couple of examples, I mean, I think you have to understand them as two-way exchanges where the project cannot be made unless you've got both sides working together, that there's something in the dialogical exchange that makes the project. Like, for example, I had an artist who was a Vietnamese American artist who came and she was really interested in the kind of global trade routes of the goods that are often sold in El Java because many of them are made in Vietnam. And so she came with kind of a computer full of video footage that she had shot on a boat going back to Vietnam and in the factory spaces of in Ho Chi Minh City, but she didn't really know what she was going to do with it. She just knew she wanted to kind of figure out how to use that material. And in the electronics section where they sell all the little TVs and various things, when she started to have these conversations with the vendor there, they got very excited. So they came up with this idea of sort of shooting the people who run the shop and the friends and the customers against a green screen. So they became kind of like movie stars in these little vignettes. But then Gabby superimposed onto the green screen the site of the Vietnamese work production sites, so that there was a sort of literally a dialogue between the people and the image. And then they installed it, and it was only because the guys knew how to make this happen inside their electronics studio, or little shop. But they then showed the videos on all the little screens in the shop during the event itself. So there was a way in which Gabby probably could not have done that without their expertise. They were very excited about the possibility of something different happening, to break up the routine. And the bond was very strong. Whether or not that has continued since, I don't know that it has, but there was warm, a sort of imaginary that was opened up that I think is a value as well. So I think you kind of have to think about multiple ways in which duration can impact, a project's duration or durational relationships built out of those projects can and cannot continue. So I just wanted to offer that as an example.
I think, Sofo, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say, actually, I think for me, this duration was not that, I think the question of class was kind of more urgent and felt when I was doing my project, and not so much the duration, because I think the duration, you mentioned also the money that we get, and I didn't get any money, I was like, okay, then I can do it as long as I want, let's say. So I was doing projects like 4 or 5 years till I had the feeling that, okay, now I have done what I could do. But the class question was always there. And of course, this collaboration, because I could only have done the project only when I met one person who was a fighter there, who gave me all the information. He has been kind of collecting all the, he was suing this situation, because what happened to Birimze is that they became a shareholding entity, but then they lost everything because there was a bigger fish, let's say, who got everything. So yeah, there was one person who was kind of really just fighting, and then he shared with me all kinds of information he had. But for me, the question of this class, and there would be always questions like, so you're a journalist. No one really trusts you if you're an artist, because it's artist, first of all, something else, which is another question, of course, what art is. And then if you kind of really say, no, actually, I'm not a journalist, I'm really an artist, there is always this thing of like, what are you gaining from it? And if you're gaining something, how can you help us with? So this kind of, I don't know, within the art world, there is always this kind of big words, what art can do in the social setting, which I don't know. I'm kind of a bit skeptical lately about if it can really do something. So this was kind of within the art world, this is always the discussion. And there I always had to kind of downplay myself and say, yeah, actually, I don't know if I can really help you. This is a project I'm doing. And, I almost didn't want to give them big hopes that I could help them. So it always stayed as I always stayed as an observer. So yeah, I don't think it became their project ever. And I don't know what's the kind of the tool to break this. You kind of observe, and the best you can do is to show them, and sometimes you don't even want to show them.
I think it's too ambitious to say to involve them. We are saying them, but it's always you're in the position of being an observer and documentarist in a way. And so with your work, especially, like we get to know what kind of architecture is being produced and the storytelling background, like what has been there, what are the stories. But again, with your project, duration-wise, it's kind of really, I think, long in terms of you're originally from there and you have been visiting this place for a long time and you had memories of the place. And I have no how can I say? This involving them is another. It's a really ambitious.
What I mean with the involvement is like halfway through the project, I understood. There's it has been bankrupted and money laundering is happening. It's declaring bankrupt, and then some people who already know who are going to buy it, they're buying it. So it's like 2 times happens to the same building. So at one point I thought it's actually interesting how it happens, because we all hear about the money laundering, but I was like, what's the mechanism behind it? So in a way I was thinking, okay, this project or this film can help me understand how it works. But with involvement, I mean that I don't think I came to the point to make such a movie to also show them and explain to them, so this is the mechanism. So I don't think it became a tool for them to use if we talk about the knowledge production.
Okay. Yeah, but is it also necessary that they use?
I think it would be. I don't know if it's necessary. Yeah, I think it would be very good.
My opinion, every art needs to be necessary, and it needs to at least try to solve some issues. But maybe you're right also that if it's just reflection.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessary or not necessary, but my goal would have been that it could become some kind of a tool, because throughout making the movie I understood many things, and it would have been good if they would kind of own the story as well in a way that they would understand some mechanism. And I don't think this happened, and I wouldn't know how to make this happen.
Yeah.
Sorry, there is some technical issues. Maybe this is a good time to break if there is no comments about.
There is one question on Facebook. Maybe you could check, and we can answer later, just to keep in consideration it.
We couldn't see it. Can you see it now, or
can you tell us the question?
Yeah. Sure. Is there some possibility to make projects or create something in a lower gear of capitalism? The author is Arkady Sotoristopratron. Sorry for my pronunciation. It's quite a long one. So I can say it again.
Okay. Is it possible to?
Is there some possibility to make projects or create something in a lower gear of capitalism?
Okay.
There's just one question there.
So
we keep that in mind then.
so I suggest to give a pause and continue. Like we give 5 minutes, and then we are back. So it will be 6:10.
All right.
It's been
Okay.
10 minutes.
Shall we continue the Facebook question? Is it
the Chilean guys?
Yeah, the Chilean friends who asked, like, is it possible curate or organize an art event without in the circle of capitalism, right? More or less. Shall we continue the Facebook question? Okay. Is it the Chilean? Yeah. So there was a feedback. Sorry, the YouTube channel was open, so it's repeated. Or we can come to that later. Is there anyone who want to comment on this? Yeah. Lela, please.
Sorry, I actually wanted to comment rather to the discussion that we had before, because I think it was a very important discussion, and maybe then we can come back to the question that we got. That I think the questions raised are very important because these are both ethical and political questions, and I can very much empathize with it also as a researcher, right? And it's super clear. The class question is very clear, and I was spending a lot of months with ladies of the age of my mother, for whom I was this kind of upwardly mobile, back then still a PhD goal, the kind of future they would actually wish for their children, but they were very often very strongly feeling that they could not support their children to do that, right? To go abroad to do a PhD. And it's another story. I mean, I could also share a lot of stories of very deep poverty and economic challenges from my childhood and from what my family went through, but it's still like you're an image of something that people that you spend time with feel they're detached from, right? The possibilities that are not there for them. So there is this direct confrontation with class. I could feel that I confront them with this question, right? There is the other thing that Sophia mentioned, that what do you give back? And it was so interesting because when I came to the field, it was really the years where state and city hall orchestrated repressions were very harsh. So people were mistrustful. And actually, the first thing that everybody would ask me, first of all, they also said, are you a journalist? And no matter how hard I explained, before the months passed where they saw me sitting and making notes and being with them. But before then, they would always be like, okay, Lela is saying something, but she must be a journalist. And if they would introduce me to their friends, I would still be a journalist. And they confronted me with this question, what can you do for us? And I have to say, I would always say nothing. And maybe that was wrong, but I felt very insecure to promise them anything, because it's not that I felt big political agency in my work, right? And I thought it was somewhat fair to say, well, you know, if you're still willing to help me, you can help me, but I cannot promise that I can do much for you. But with all these questions being very valid, I still think that even if we do a little bit, we still do a lot. And perhaps we don't need to imagine that we do this for the people that help us, people that are our interviewees, people that are the partners of our research projects or artist projects, but we are all political subjects, ultimately, right? And it's also our wishes and desires. And it matters for me what I wish for this city and in this city. And I mean it also for all of us. Some of us live here partially, some of us live here more, some of us can vote, some of us cannot, but we still always have power on shaping the city and the public spaces for it, and we are in power of projecting things in different ways. And I would not, and how do I say, at least the piece that I can find with some of these ethical challenges is to say, look, okay, it's clear and it's arrogant to think that I'm going to help the street vendors, or I'm going to help the traders, or but I want to help myself. I want to help myself in this city, right? I want to live in this city where certain spaces are safe for other people, where I can talk to other people, where I can see that they're allowed to be, where I'm allowed to be, where I'm not criminalized and people that I love are not criminalized. So in this sense, I think, and part of our work is in that direction, right? And in this sense, I do see a lot that we can do, because we are wishing for certain presents and certain futures, and maybe we won't change the world, but we are here to do a little bit for it, for ourselves and for whoever we love around us, if that makes sense.
I really appreciate what you just said, Layla, and I always, I guess, whenever I hear a project about helping, it always just sends up either a yellow or a red flag for me, because I understand that we want, to make the world a better place in what we, through what we do. But I also think that there's the danger of kind of, reinstating a kind of colonialist model of like, I know what's best in this situation and I'm going to help you. And I really think that's, not the way to go in. And as you said, it's like very much about that you don't know what's going to happen. You don't, but you're willing to be potentially in some way transformed or learn something from the exchange. And, the promise of what you are going to give back is unknown. I mean, it's a social exchange at that point as well. And I mean, one of the things that I remember most, or that made a big impression on me at the time when we did this project, one of the artists, Joanna Potig, was working with one of the guys in the tire area, the car area, and making these kind of tire totems. But the totems, which he wanted to have on the top of his shack, she asked him, what do you want the content to look like? What do you want it to look like? How do you, and he gave her a poem that he felt very strongly was something that had moved him. And she created the imagery out of that poem. But the thing that was most memorable for me was that after we finished the project, as we were getting ready to say, kind of saying goodbye, he said, the thing that had impacted him, Zachro was his name, was that he had kind of forgotten about the pleasure and the kind of interesting challenges that can happen when you are in dialogue with in the cultural sphere, in a kind of creative world. And that he talked about how he had, in his younger years and during the Soviet times, he would go to the different cultural events quite regularly, and that he had stopped doing that. He and his family really didn't do that anymore, and that the experience somehow reignited an interest in thinking about what role that might have in his life again. How that played out afterwards, I have no idea, but I found it very significant that he shared that as a kind of feedback. And again, it was something that I don't know that any of us would have anticipated. And also, just to pick up one other strand of what you were talking about, I also think this idea that rather than assuming that what you're giving back is necessarily with the vendors or with the people in the marketplace, there's also a way in which, if you're changing the way other people are looking at that marketplace, perhaps the students who we worked with, I don't know, the audience members, we made sure that this was in collaboration with Magda Garuli's Artistarium event that year, so that we kind of hijacked a lot of the international art people to come over to the market and have to kind of see what we were doing there, and become aware of what the issues were and what the environment was like. So I think that sometimes you have to kind of nuance the idea of the way in which you have impact, and also kind of not assume that it is a monumental scale, but that these small exchanges can leave memories and deep marks in people's when they're successful, and even when they're not. I mean, the mistakes can also be really leave a memory as well.
Yeah, very interesting. I was just I wanted to say that like whenever I go to some Gori markets, I mean I have this thing as well, like with different projects where people think I'm a journalist or a photographer, but I'm just, in most of the cases, I'm just like observer and trying to find the story. But every time I go to some Gori market, and I go there like almost every week when I'm in Tbilisi, they think I'm also selling something. So like whatever I'm holding, like I don't know, it can be like the fruits that I recently bought in the same place, or I bought, I don't know, something, watch or whatever. They're like, so how much is it? How much? Like people like start following me, and they think that like I'm also one of them, which I find really cute, but at the same time very interesting. That like I don't go to different markets. I mean, I go to Eliava obviously, but like Samgori is my home, you know. And like I know how it functions, and there like it's just like everybody is everybody, you know. Like there is no really this like differences between the artist and the guys who are selling fruits, or the guys who are selling fruits there and just random visitors. It's kind of the place where anybody can be anybody, you know. And that's what I love about these markets in general in Tbilisi, and especially in Samgori. So I want to ask a question about relating your previous, that you didn't mention it. You did a written piece about this Women's Day and flower markets. Can you tell us about it a bit? Yeah, it was another great experience just to observe, you know, when there is this like the day of women, for 3rd of March in Georgia, where not everybody, but a lot of women from Western Georgia, like basically from everywhere, like the very end of the West to the end of I don't know, from the Black Sea to Azerbaijan, basically, like everybody around Georgia, they're coming to these Samgori markets at maybe 10 p.m. Like on 1st of March or 2nd of March, and they are staying there like for 24 hours. So basically, like they're never going home. And they're surrounded with this like massive ocean of flowers, which is something like when you go there and you see it, it's like, what? So it's not organized by any like market administration or any other big corporations or anything, but it's just like a random women from all around the country. They know somehow that this day they can be there and they can sell their flowers to other shops in Georgia, or anybody who wants to buy flowers. And they're just like first going around the mountains, they're picking up with their hands, and then they're coming here and selling like massive amounts of very famous flowers, like violets, and I'm not really good with flower names, so yellow, pink, and white flowers. And it's just brilliant experience. Like if you have a chance next March to go there, just to support them also financially, but I don't think they need it because their flowers are sold like this really fast. But just to go there and to experience this magic, basically what I call it there, like all this like collection. And it's also interesting how it works, how they organize the space, because mostly like people don't really know each other. Yes, some people come together with like their own cars, like different families in one car, but mostly it's also like from different regions, from different cities, from total different areas of the country, and they're coming together and they're organizing this space really randomly and very shortly without any kind of a written structure, basically. And I think you should definitely go visit them in the beginning of March.
Thank you. And is there anyone who wants to comment of this Yeah, please, Katja.
Yes, because I still want to get back to those issues. I like what you said, Leila, about the very honest answer, like, what can I do for you? Nothing. I'm also not saying and not attempting, absolutely not, anything regarding this helping issue. What I mean is that whenever I work in a context that is not an art context, let's say it like that, the moment I leave, I start to feel guilty. And the reason why I feel guilty is because I do have regular encounters sometimes afterwards when I know that, for instance, regarding the AR project, when people ask me, why are you not coming? We know you live in Tbilisi, so why don't you visit us? And they have a point. I mean, why am I there for a couple of weeks non-stop? My answer would be, that's why I mentioned the funding earlier, I was traveling after that. I was doing other projects. I was sitting at home writing, whatever, but I didn't have the capacity to be there on a regular basis. So I stepped into the community and stepped out. And maybe it's a matter of phrasing, also what you said, Lydia, regarding this, what was it, durational aspect, that when one comes in, doing whatever project, whatever research, whatever experience, it doesn't matter, to be very honest and constantly honest from the beginning. Look, I'm going to be here for some time, let's collaborate or not, but I will be gone. Because it's easier when when I do a project in some country when everybody knows I will leave, I think for many people it's much easier to accept, I will be gone, I'm here for 4 weeks, 2 months, whatever. But living here, I constantly, with those projects, whenever I came back, on Eliava, it was more like kind of, nobody was like blaming me, there was just a big disappointment. With another project in the Bazaars, here I was basically kicked out of the community. I felt so uncomfortable that I never wanted to go back afterwards. And that's why I'm trying to figure out a way to not have this dichotomy again of like us as artists or whoever, them. I mean, even when we listen to ourselves, we constantly talk like that. It's us and them. I want to get out of this and I don't know how. That's the thing. And that's why I'm concerned about it, because I don't know how to get out of feeling, and I think to some extent it is, even though I don't see it like that, but it is true, of exploiting a situation, exploiting people to get something going and then stepping out. Not the happy thing, but this kind of, bend about next thing.
Thank you. Lela?
Katarina, I very much can feel you. And, I guess there is no complete way of addressing this, but there can always be certain little strategies that we can deploy. And it's not that I strategized about it, but now that you were telling, I remembered I had this very interesting philosophical talk with a marshrutka driver, and that was my next research after working on bazaars and with street vendors. I was studying marshutkas in Bishkek and in Tbilisi, and I had this very interesting philosophical talk with a Bishkek marshutka driver with whom I spent some time, and he was really sincerely saying, look, we made friends, and I will be missing you. And it's just a very genuine, sincere thing. And I was telling him, and this is perhaps also my response to you, that I think sharing that aspect of our life, and I think in this sense now we can talk of our life because we are highly mobile people. And this high mobility has its own costs, and we have made our own experiences of losing and gaining new relationships, but losing them and making our peace with them. And then I really sat down with him and had an hour-long talk of how I deal with this pain of gaining new friends and losing them and not being able to always keep in touch with them. And perhaps this is what we can share, right? The challenges of our lives, because this is a challenge of our lives. And perhaps, we are more privileged in certain senses, but disprivileged in other senses. This is a costly life. And I think, I don't know, again, it won't address all you're concerned with. The insertion and very quick getting out of somewhere is still painful, and it does provide you with the feeling of guilt. But perhaps one little thing we can do is to very openly always share where we are, because it is true that this is our life. And it also hurts us, actually. It doesn't only hurt others that feel as if we abandoned them, but we are also abandoned in this, or we're abandoning things that are precious to us because we need to go from one thing to the other. If that makes sense.
It's very lovely what you say. It's very beautiful how you structure it. Yeah, I'm impressed.
True. Like Lydia?
Well, I guess what I was just thinking about how every time I go back to Tbilisi, I always go and visit Zahro and the guys and the different people that we worked with. And, they always ask by name about the artists who they worked with. I mean, there's kind of a deep memory there. But I guess I also think about the fact that another way to not feel that sense of abandonment is to recognize the way in which these projects then become translated into different kinds of discourses. And, so that there's also the way in which having done the project and having established whatever temporary even relationships, that you also are raising issues that we're talking about today having to do with the role and the politics of commons, of the role and the importance of valuing informal market structures in the face of capitalism taking over it, and so that there are also other kinds, in a way, of ways that the piece sparks broader dialogues in multiple audiences if you take the work and discuss it or use it as a catalyst for sort of coming back to what you learned through the experience, or what really was maybe the political or ideological impetus of doing it in the first place. So I also think that that's a way in which in that feeling of well, is what I'm doing, does it matter, does it make a difference, etc. I think it's also important to remember that you're probably or possibly also functioning through the act of representing the experience and the issues that the space generates for more thoughtful kinds of considerations. So it's a translation across disciplines and audiences and cultures that I also think is a really important thing to think about in the architecture of these projects.
Is there anyone who wants to comment on this topic?
And then maybe we can continue with the Facebook question.
Maybe Facebook question come a bit later, but first I want to kind of ask Lele about the vendors, how they kind of represent themselves in the form of kind of association, and is it still is it an ongoing struggle still with the street vendors, and how it's being presented in media, or is it still on the table, this attack of the the state to vendors? Like, is it like because I'm asking this because you are been following this topic for a while, and how is the current situation? Like,
thanks for this question. I mean, in all honesty, there is this very basic statement that street vendors themselves would very often make. They would say, there is no other better employment, and they cannot just deprive us from the only way of earning the most meager income and survival. And in this sense, it's not that I personally would advocate for street vending, but in a situation like Georgia's and many other countries, it is very important that people are not deprived of this capacity to take care of themselves, and people are not deprived from the access to public spaces to do so. And this was the biggest struggle that state had with the street vendors, that they wanted to push street vendors into commercial spaces so that the street vendors would pay the market price for the piece of land, for the part of table that they used to sell things. This didn't work, and it didn't work, and it would never work, and it will never work, for one basic reason, because the state was trying to deal with street vendors as if they were commercial agents, but this is essentially very often, not always, certainly not always, but very often street vendors cannot be seen as business people, right? They are rather groups that need serious state support and social assistance, but this is the state that does not provide that. So the social question is forcefully and violently framed as a market question or an economic question. And that's why it didn't work when the state pushed for it, because market is full of insecurities, and these people that are engaged in petty trade, big majorities of them cannot afford to play with market rules, right? They cannot pay those very changing prices always. There are some groups that will and some others that will not. So at least my impression is, and I haven't studied this very severely, the last time that the Tbilisi City Hall made one more, action against the street vendors was in 2017. You might remember it. It was more than disgusting because the City Hall removed the street vendors from public spaces and mostly around bazaars. And what was terribly disgusting, I mean, very fascistic, I would say, was that then they went over the places where the vendors would, the places that vendors would occupy. And they showed us all this machinery and, very elaborate cleaning techniques that they applied to cleanse the space for the remnants of something that was portrayed obviously as dirty, not belonging to public space, and so on. And they took pride in this. And again, this discursive aspect of violence is just as significant as the actual violence of removing people from the places where they earn their income. But to my best understanding, the City Hall has been changing its policy. We have to say that over the last 15 years, it has always been so, right? The City Hall will attack the vendors, then they will relax the regulations for a little while, the vendors will be back, then they will think that for one or the other political move, they need to attack the vendors again, but then the vendors will come back. I think that Georgian state, besides the worst years of Saakashvili, has not reached, and I hope it will never reach, the degree of repression capacity that it will be able to break traders' resistance, because traders need these spaces and they will always come back. As long as they have no alternative, they will always come back, and they do always come back. And if in the last 3-4 years, our government has learned that this repression and, temporary interventions and cleansing to, by the way, convince middle class urbanites, right? Perhaps the city hall gained the sensitivity that this doesn't work. And perhaps this is one of our roles, because we are actually close to those middle class urban dwellers. And I do hope that relative to 10 years ago, currently there is much more sensitivity about the topic. Because when the government is targeting street vendors, they really target they're like, we need European clean streets. And there is groups that are convinced by this. And I think we should take away this phantom support for this discourse. I don't know if I quite responded to your question, but I think this is where we're going to, and I think that the city hall will always be careful about doing this type of overt repressive actions. Mm-hmm. Now, the second question is whether they're actually addressing the problem, because the problem is not just the state repression, the problem is all the conditions that many street vendors have to work. And that's another question. Mm-hmm. And I do think it is the state responsibility, because I don't think we can take street vendors as yet another small business people.
Mm. Okay. So technically we will end.
Actually, I can add.
Yeah, please, Anna.
Yeah, very short comment about it, about these petty traders from Guldani, that in front of the metro stations, there were always this kind of petty traders. And what Lela mentioned, that the government gave some places in a market area to go there, is quite common in Guldani case. But still, these petty traders, it could be like Roma people or even Georgians who are selling. They're coming out at evening time, like from 6 to midnight, for
There's a disconnection.
example, because at the time police really goes to them not to trade through the station area, which is quite crowded, very peoply placed.
The last bit a bit not understood. Could you repeat the last bit? Because there was a connection problem and.
Yes, of course. I told that during the daytime, the police forbid them to sell the goods, but when the night comes, like from 6 p.m. till the midnight, they are still selling the goods free. These petty traders who gave the part of the marketplace, but they still cannot afford this place because there are some salary to pay for the place. So they, at the night time, they are coming out and selling their goods as usual. And everyone knows about it, actually. All the population of Guldani who is using the metro, everyone knows that at that time, like when it's already evening, they will come out and they can buy quite cheap things around the metro station.
Yeah, I realized that when I was visiting Guldani also, after certain, after some point, the atmosphere totally changes, and like this visibility issue, like what difference is like, when the daytime and the nighttime, it's quite a big question about class as well. Like it relates to this levels. And So we have like 15 minutes, and so the only Facebook question, I think, do we have another Facebook question?
Yeah, we don't really have the access.
No, we don't.
We don't. So returning back to the question, would you like to comment on that a bit? Shall I repeat it again?
No. Yeah, I think like it was about the exhibitions, right, and the art projects. Yeah, for me it was a bit unclear, but especially with the art thing, you know, like if you're an artist and if you do want to bring some project, you don't necessarily, I mean, it depends on the project as well, right? So if you need like a bigger project, the fundings for this, then of course you need to approach to some funding organization. But so it all depends how big the project you want to do, and then you can just do it. And I don't think you need to be financed for this. Sorry, but if you really want to do it, it should be done. But it also depends on the
to this structure like biennials or like this big canons, which are like kind of organized and culturally recognized, and which has the main attraction. Because as an artist or as a researcher, you're in a precarious position in terms of like the difficulties to maintain your livelihood and also like continue production wise. So I think there's like two levels. In one level, you keep on producing and somehow with your own resources, without this, of course, like
Sapa was doing also with the Pirinze place.
And then at the same time, like you have it comes to the point that you have to, or there's a demand to show it. And unfortunately, this also the rise of like kind of this cultural competition in a way triggers this canonization of events and culture in a way, and it kind of creates kind of gap between like how art is kind of placed in the public, you know, in terms of like meeting the audience, connecting with the audience. And again, it's a problem of feedback, or like to the question, I think it's possible to do it, but I think it didn't come to a point to revolutionize all these events in a way, in that sense.
Yeah,
Katarina, please.
I just want, on one hand, to continue, but make it maybe even more again now. I think the basis that most of us work on is we also have to pay our bills. So I like the idea that I just do all the projects and the research and everything that I want to do. Absolutely, I wish I could do that. But I have to make money. I have to pay my bills. I need to eat, you know, all the basic things that everybody else needs. And if you are not from a family that, I mean, my family obviously, sorry, but would not transfer me a monthly stipend, I think this would be amazing. I would be very happy about it. So then just, you know, like all the financial stuff is done, and then I do whatever I think is really important. And not just, which doesn't mean that I do a lot of work that I don't care about, but I do have to negotiate like everybody else, which doesn't mean that you need whatever kind of funding for everything. But you need to find a balance financially for you as an individual. And then what Gio said, obviously, some projects that need more finances in terms of production or traveling or whatever than others. So that's one thing. The other thing, what you just mentioned regarding visibility, I think this is also a bit tricky because on one hand, it's very individual. I mean, many, if you reach with your work, whatever you do, if you write, if you make some installations, research, whatever, if you reach one person, you can be so lucky. And reach in the sense that on an intellectual, emotional, whatever level, if it touches one person. You cannot measure art by what many of the funding applications are, how many people will be there at the exhibition. It actually doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if 5 people come or 5,000 people come. You need to reach one person. And then everything is good. But we all know that whenever we apply for funding, CV is important. People look at, do you have big names, curators, big, events or something like that. So I think what most of us are doing anyways, to find some balance in between. I think most important is not to totally lose track of what you want to do. Coming back to what Lela said earlier, also we do things for ourselves in the sense of being a political subject, having this urge to do something. It gets tricky the moment you do everything just for money or just for recognition. I mean, maybe it can also work, I don't know, but to not lose this aim in the end.
Yeah, I mean, to pick up on it, I really agree with a lot of what you're saying, Kat. And I think, I feel like a lot of the projects that I've done over the years have been things that have operated on really tiny budgets. And it's really only because of the privilege I have as a teacher, that I have my full-time job as a teacher that gives me a salary so that the basics are covered. That I'm then not looking to these projects to be money-making events. And the artists who are involved, I mean, while I always make sure, I feel very strongly ethically that you want to pay artists something for the time and the energy and the labor that they're doing. So I try to find the money, or I take funding that I have access to and redistribute it for that purpose. But really, people are more interested because they're curious about the place, or they're interested in the questions or the debates, or very keen to understand the politics of the the site or the subject more deeply. And so they're willing to give time to as well as to sort of make sure that they're covered. But I think that I don't know exactly what is meant by the lower gear of capitalism, but I don't think anybody is in these projects has made something that then can be resold. I mean, it's not like then it goes to a gallery and they create a price tag on it and it goes into an art market system. It doesn't operate like that typically. So it's it's on a whole different level than what is more the conventional art market practice. So I think that those, I'm not sure what lower gear means, but I think it is not a profit motivated endeavor. The things that we're talking about, and you definitely have to find the way of paying the bills and making sure that you're not exploiting people in the process as much as you possibly can, and to try to think about those things in the structuring of the piece in some way.
Yeah, what I meant being like in a precarious position was these actually, like to be able to pay your rent and also have a kind of a regular income as a teaching, because I was also kind of experienced that in a way. And yeah, it was a bit unclear, I think, what the question trying maybe wanted us to comment on the situation more. And
the beautiful mother of Georgia.
Yeah, here,
in Berlin.
Here is
also there.
Also in Sofo's hand. And hello.
Hello, little guy.
Hello, little guy. And do you have any other comments regarding to what we have discussed to end up our cut, please?
Just one more comment regarding exactly what we talked about now. When we think, since we have touched class differentiation, now this precarious or like income issues. Again, I know I cannot change it or cannot help the world or change the world. But it would be, of course, also amazing if in the future, basically all over the world, art students could be from all different kind of classes. Because, you know, we still, also what Leila said earlier, I mean, we are more connected to the middle class urban dwellers. Imagine all the works that could happen if, starting from education, things were much more broader, like mostly from the statistics, and adults, people from middle class families, because it's very difficult to study otherwise. So more as another outlook that was in my head, that projects would also develop very, very differently, additionally differently, if our backgrounds were even more diverse than they are now.
Great. I'm in love with our background.
Sofo, we can't hear you. You have to unmute.
Philip saw this connection. He said, "Hey, look, we also have the statue here." So it's, now we have a little conversation between these two statues.
Yeah. That's great.
Thank you all, and I don't know how this will continue in a way, and I think it will turn into a written like a transcription of what we have discussed, or like a kind of a statement maybe we came out of it. I will transcribe this with the highlights, and maybe we can do something collaborative as a text to participate in the like publication of the Biennial.
Yes.
I think these are very valuable, and it's very important to switch between your position as a researcher, as an artist, as an architect, switch between your position and also consider yourself. And I think one of the remarks what Leila said, like we want to live in a city that we would like to have, and that's why we are discussing, or we are trying to interfere the issues related with bazaars or other things in terms of like relation with maybe with urban activism. So thank you all, and thank you Tico for introducing us and like helping us to come together. And
yes, I can add also one thing. Thank you so much for this super interesting discussion, and it's certainly a topic that it's very broad, and it's can be like discussed further, and it's lacking also a physical performance, this project. So I hope that we can have a possibility in summer to do something also physically, because we have Tbilisi Architecture Biennial is now finishing on Sunday, but the project continues one more year. And we'll have activities in Berlin and Ukraine and also Skopje. So maybe there will be a possibility to bring this talk into a life.
Yeah, it's important. Leila, you want to say something? Okay. Yeah, like we can think about how it can come to being all together. And in terms of we try to find some way to do it. Yeah,
cool. Thank you very much, guys. It was, and girls, mostly girls actually. It was great hearing all of your thoughts and amazing projects. I really enjoyed it, and I hope to see you somewhere soon again in live together. And
yes, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good evening.
Thank you very much.
Same here.
For inviting.
We stay in
Hope
touch.
to see you soon, everyone.